Good morning, class. I hope everyone's having a magnificent day so far. My name is John Franco. I'm one of your fellow classmates. I am very excited to present to you my case, but before we get started, I think that it's important for me to thank Professor Starr for allowing me to present. I look forward to either refreshing your mind or maybe giving you more information that you didn't know about. So, my case is Royal Mail, and before we dive deep into the finance, I think it's very important that we first start from the beginning. So, Royal Mail has a pretty interesting history. It was first founded in 1516 by King Henry VII. It is part of the Postal Service, and what's interesting about Royal Mail is that it was first government owned. So, they had this monopoly status, which means that they were the only people allowed to provide these services, meaning that they had zero competition and they were just by themselves. A couple of noteworthy accomplishments is that they were the first to offer a delivery service nationally for a single rate. They created a postage stamp that we know today, and they were the first to have a fleet of mail coaches, which is pretty interesting. Now, for Royal Mail, we have a couple current events that are noteworthy of knowing. For example, the monopoly status after a couple hundred years of having this monopoly status, unfortunately, it was taken away as of 2006, and because of that, they kind of went from a non-competitive to a competitive market. And as of 2013, the since it was government owned, the government actually sold 60% of its 1 billion shares to the public, meaning that Royal Mail, as of 2013, was part of the London Stock Exchange. So, Hillary Hart. Who is Hillary Hart? Hillary Hart is a senior financial analyst. She's been working for Royal Mail for about 7 years. She is currently about to meet with senior managers of Royal Mail. The, the point of this meeting is to evaluate the cost of capital, which I will explain a little bit further. And they're also going to be speaking about how to change from their orientation, which was the past, which was more, it was more monopoly oriented, to more market based orientate, being more market based oriented due to them being part of the public now. And also, we'll speak more further about the Office of Communications. They are putting Royal Mail into review. Now we're going to be talking about cost of capital. We're going to be talking about what it is, why is it important, who sets it, and how do we calculate it. So first, what is cost of capital? Cost of capital is the expense incurred by a company to fund its operations and investment. In other words, it is the minimum rate of return a company must earn on its investment to satisfy investors and lender needs. As we know, money is not free. We have to pay some type of interest for it. So, when it comes to estimating the cost of capital, it can actually aid in making sound business decisions. For example, by calculating whether it is a positive or negative return, it will tell us whether something is worth investing into. Now, for who sets it is neither the investors nor the manager, but instead it is the accounting department of Royal Mail in this case. Now, what type of formula do we use? We actually use the weighted average cost of capital, aka WACC. The way that this works is that we use the average when it comes to the ratios. There is a ratio when it comes to debt and equity. As we know, cost of capital involves those two. That's where we get the funding for our operations in a business. But there is usually 100%, and for debt and equity, there's different ratios. For example, if a company could have 60% debt, 40% equity, and other could be flipped, where the majority is equity and the minority is debt. So when it comes to calculating this formula, we have to take the average of that 100% and also take account of market value when it comes to the debt and the equity. So let's get on to the next. Next, we're going to talk about a cost of capital analysis done for Royal Mail. There was a couple good and bad things about this. A couple good things is that it was very neat. It was very well presented. It had the right cost of debt. It had the beta was fine. The tax rate was completely fine. But unfortunately, they made a couple mistakes when making this analysis. The first mistake was the equity portion of it. It looks like they decided to use the book value, which is a big no-no when it comes to the WACC. We're supposed to be using the market value, and how you do the market value of equity is that you take the market share outstanding versus the current stock price. and we will be using the CAPM, which will be the capital asset pricing model, which is very effective. The beta, like I said, was totally fine, but the risk-free rate was also incorrect. It should have been a 2.03, and also the return on the market and the return on the market is something that also he made a mistake. And the way that we calculate the return on the market is by having the market risk premium plus a risk-free rate. So with all that being fixed, I also did the analysis myself. As you can see here, the WACC, according to this analysis, was 3.828. And once I plug in the right numbers and I do the correct way of formulating this, the WACC should have been at a 5.137. Now, for also the WACC, we were meant to calculate any of competitive firms' WACCs as well. For example, we have National Grid, we have Severn Trent, we have Texaco, United Utilities, and Vodafone. All of them had reasonably low WACCs, but as you can tell, there was one in particular that had the lowest, which would be National Grid. But also it's important because not all of these are, yes, they're competitive firms, but they're not something that we necessarily have to worry about. The only company that we would consider direct competition would be Vodafone, because they are in the telecommunications, and it's similar to our services, which is postal communications. So obviously that is the closest that's the closest company we have to direct competition. The rest have competitive WACCs, but for us, thankfully, we have a lower WACC, which is good, meaning that we are less risky compared to Vodafone. And to also aid you in the future, once you do calculate your own WACC for your own company or for your employer's company, I think that we should talk about how, when it comes to proper assumptions. So the proper assumptions would be the current risk-free rate, the market risk premium, and the firm's beta. You have to make sure that these are accurate, or you will not have a proper result for WACC. Also, we should use market-based inputs for the debt and equity. We should not be using book-based inputs. Also, the debt to equity mix is very important. We should put those also as the market value. Very, very important. Like I said, if you don't do market value, you won't have an accurate WACC. And lastly, the estimate should reflect expected risk and returns. So keep that in mind when you do your own WACC in the future. And now we're going to wrap it up and do a quick recap of what we learned today. So first, let's talk about the changes of Royal Mail. They were once a government-owned enterprise with a monopoly status. Now, they are part of a competitive market, and ever since they went public in 2009, they have become more market-oriented. Now, the cost of capital, like we said, is very important. It is something that is used to calculate how healthy a business is and how risky a business is. Like we said, a cost of capital is just the minimum rate of return a company must have to feed its investors and also their lenders. Now, we can talk about some key considerations of Royal Mail's cost of capital. Like we said, the cost of capital, aka, was formulated by WACC, which is the weighted average cost of capital. For Royal Mail, they had a 5.14, which indicates a low cost of raising capital, which is really, really good. Also, the WACC is lower than their adversary, which is Vodafone, giving them a competitive advantage. And also, the debt to equity ratio is favorable to this firm. So, with that, I really hope that you learned something. Again, I want to thank Professor Starr for allowing me to present, and I hope that you have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.